Shout out to G-Man Boxing.
Alright people, review of the week time. So, where do we start? We had a lot of fights on this weekend. We got to talk about all of them. But I think we need to talk about that absolute farce. That's what it was. Evander Holyfield. What was the guy's name? Vitor Beltan or something like that? The guy's name was he an MMA fighter or something like that? I know he had like one official fight many years ago under like Queensberry rules. But like I'm not up to speed with these MMA guys. But Evander Holyfield is nearly 60 years old, been inactive for over a decade. What the hell was he doing in there, even with an exhibition? And I didn't watch the full fight. I seen him getting dropped. That's just sad. You know, it's sad on so many levels. One is because that's an absolutely all-time great fighter who was resorting to this just to make a bit of money. And it's sad in the sense of this was allowed to happen. You know, boxing, even if it's an exhibition like that, there should be things put in place. I mean, Holyfield's speech for a long time now has not been amazing. I wouldn't say he's out and out. You know, he's not as bad as, say, like a Riddick Bowe or someone like that, but he sure as hell speech is not as good as it should be for someone of that age. He's been in hard fights. Should you really be letting him, even for an exhibition, go in there and take punches? I mean, I'll use this analogy, right? Maybe it's a poor analogy, but I'll use this analogy. Look at Nick Blackwell. Now, Nick Blackwell had a very, very lucky escape against Eubank Jr. when he had a bleed in the brain. I don't believe he needed surgery the first time. He made a full recovery. You know, we've seen him on morning shows here in the UK. But he looked himself, he was talking normally, he got a second chance. No more boxing, but he got a second chance. Inexplicably, towards the end of 2016, he went in to spar someone. Now, why in God's name, and I don't know, the trainer I don't think has ever been named, but why in God's name they'd let him do that is beyond me. But the fact of the matter is, he took some shots on the head, ended up falling back into a coma. Thankfully, he did need surgery the second time. Thankfully, he made a recovery, but he's not. I mean, like, if you'd seen Nick Blackwell today and compare him to how he was after the first coma he went into with the bleed in the brain in 2016, it's night and day. His speech is not dreadful, but it's not as clear as it used to be. And I think that he definitely suffered more from the second one. And it should never have happened. For God's sake, I mean, why would you let someone get in the ring and take shots? I don't know, it feels not quite that bad, but seeing how slow he is, his age, let alone 58 years old, I mean, Jesus. There are people who get in the ring in their 40s. For exhibitions, you'd say, why are you getting in the ring? You're no spring chicken. What are you doing? He's nearly 60. And not speaking exactly the clearest. Why would anyone let that fight happen? And worst of all, now someone wants to, but I've heard Riddick Bowe, I think someone even said, I think it was on Twitter or something a couple of months ago, said that yeah, he was going to do an exhibition. Surely not. Evander Holyfield should not have been in the ring. Period. But for God's sake, Riddick Bowe, he really is that bad. Like, Riddick Bowe's brain must, God knows what it looks like, it must have CTE. Definitely. You can't let him in the ring. Nowhere near the ring. Absolutely never. It just looks so bad on the sport that you have these old, washed up fighters, many of whom, like Evander Holyfield, have lost it all, or lost the majority of their money, same as Riddick Bowe, going in there in an exhibition, a shell of themselves just to make a little bit of money. Surely something has to be, surely you have to put something, even if it's an exhibition, surely something has to be done. If they wanted to do it, why not just do a body spar? Why? Because no one wants to see that. But for God's sake, there has to be something done with these old guys. Also on that card, David Haye. Now, David Haye is nowhere near as shot. He is shot, but he's nowhere near as old, washed, or as, I want to say, senile as Evander Holyfield. And David Haye fought his friend Joe Fortner. Joe Fortner is, 10-0 as a light heavyweight? Having seen what I saw, you got to wonder, what in God's name were the opponents like to get to 10. Was he 10-0 or 9-0? But he certainly had a couple of pro fights. He looked terrible. I mean, David Haye, you could tell by his movement back when he fought Mark Demori that this guy was not what he used to be. And, even then, not even trying, was able to drop Joe Fontenot with a jab in the first round. David Haye, if David Haye really wanted to, he could have knocked him out pretty quickly and pretty easily. You're David Haye, an exhibition with your mate, getting paid handsomely for it. Your mate is already a billionaire. He doesn't need the money. You got to see why he did it. It's funny. He went and caught. Look, when David Haye was in his peak, like 2009, 2011, I quite liked David Haye. I did. I thought he was just. I didn't think he was the second coming or anything like that. I didn't think he'd beat Klitschko, although I was hoping he would at the time. I did enjoy him. He just had, I don't know what it was. He had something about him. You knew he was like a snake oil salesman, but even back then he had something about him. And I guess that kind of stuck with me, because although I wasn't on YouTube for either of the Bellew fights, I thought he'd win both. The first one I was surprised at, pleasantly surprised that he lost. And the second one I thought he'd win again, and he obviously didn't. I guess I've always had that. Like, I call it like it is. David Haye is just, he'll try and sell a steak to a vegan. That's David Haye. But I guess I've always took from what my early days of boxing, I always kind of liked him. Just the way just his personality, I suppose. I don't know why. I know he's an absolute, I know he's an absolute salesman. I know that, but he called out Tyson Fury, said that that's the one fight he'd come back for. Obviously, that fight was meant to happen in 2013. That fight in 2013, just cast your minds back to it. I think Tyson Fury would have won that fight. That would have been the coming out with Tyson Fury. I think he would have won the fight, because I think David Haye was really finished after the Chisora fight. I think his body was breaking down, and I think that even if he went into that fight without the shoulder injury, I think that it was inevitable his body was going to break down at some point in a hard fight. And I think that Tyson Fury stylistically would have given David Haye a lot of problems. It would have been a fun little scrap. And it was, the build up to that fight was I remember being so excited for that fight, because the build up was exciting. The sparring David Haye was doing when he was showing clips of him and Deontay Wilder. He had Malik Scott in there. He had Deontay Wilder. No, not Malik Scott. He had Marius Wack in there. Deontay Wilder. I think he had someone else. I think he had Richard Towers in there. And it was just fun. I remember the build up very well to that fight. It's a shame we didn't see it, because I think Tyson Fury would have won the fight. I think David Haye's body was, finished at that point. But if you were talking about a prime David Haye, interesting. I still think Tyson Fury would have won the fight, but definitely an interesting fight. So he called him out. Of course he did. That was kind of that. John O'Carroll fought on that card as well. He got a win. He's back down 130 pounds. We'll see how he goes. John O'Carroll is kind of European level. I don't think he quite has it at world level. He's got a great work rate as Carroll, but that's about it. That's really, really about it. Now, that was Saturday night's card. Obviously, oh yes, I must point out, we had the zone card as well on last night. Kerman Laharaga in an absolutely fantastic fight. I watched it, but I didn't. Last night was just a rest night. I wasn't going to cover anything. I wasn't going to make any videos. So I watched it, and I just enjoyed it for what it was. It was a hell of a fight. When you talk about two styles coming together well and just gelling perfectly, that was that. I can't remember the guy's name, the French guy. I think it was Dylan something. Slips my mind, but that fight was a perfect example of styles make fights. They just gel together beautifully. You had the boxing of the opponent, and you had the pressure, the uneducated pressure of Kerman Laharaga, because he's not really good. He just follows. He doesn't cut the ring off at all effectively. Defense is very leaky, but it was just so much fun to watch. We had two very good fights on this weekend, actually, as a matter of fact. I'll touch on the Sam Eggington one now in a sec. But I enjoyed that. It's a shame it ended on technical decision, and I wasn't keeping scoring of it, but it was one of them fights where it could have went either way. It really did hinge on the last few rounds. It was a tale of two halves. His opponent started off very strong, was schooling Laharaga for a bit, but Laharaga caught up to him, the body punching, and I think that the tempo, Laharaga was able to keep up that tempo, because it was fought at quite a pace. This fight was definitely. If you have the Zone app, you can go back and rewatch it. Watch it. It was a good fight, very good fight. It was fought at a very, very frantic pace. If ever a fight deserves a rematch, I think it's this one because it ended on a technical decision, accidental clash of heads, opened the cut on Laharaga. It was a bad cut. I don't begrudge the referee stopping the fight, to be honest. It was actually quite bad, and the blood was flowing. I think we need a rematch, and I wouldn't be surprised if the EBU order a rematch. You know, it was a very, very, very good fight. It was for the European title, so Laharaga is now a 2-weight European champion, which is he's a solid European level fighter, very solid. At world level, at welterweight, would never have really worked out. And again, at 154, I just think he's too leaky defense. But he's solid European level as Laharaga. Brings a very big Spanish crowd. You know, the fans over there in Spain love him. This was in Barcelona, I believe, and it was electric. You know, it wasn't a big crowd, but for what it was, you know, they really made their voices heard. I'd like to see a rematch just because it was an entertaining fight. And I think that fight, you know, with 2 more rounds, and the scorecards were extremely close. Could have went either way if that fight had gone on, because who's to say his opponent wouldn't have got a second wind. I would have liked to. I hope we get a rematch. I really do. It was a great fight. Great fight. Let's talk about Friday's card, because there was a lot of cards on. Obviously, we'll talk about the main one. There was 4 cards on. The main talking point, it's reared its ugly head again. And I'm not someone who would say this fight was a robbery too much. You know, there's certain fights I felt were robberies over the years. There's certain fights I didn't. Personally, I feel that, you know, Oscar Valdez, he got a gift. He got a gift in there on Friday night. And Andre Ward versus scoring was very poor. I rate Andre Ward as an analyst, I should say, but as a scorer, subjectively, no. I think that Oscar Valdez got schooled in there. I was watching Chris Andre's fight over there where he was talking about Conceicao and saying that he felt he was getting schooled early on. Valdez was. And I went and watched it. I have to agree. I felt that Conceicao won the fight. I don't think there's been a Brazilian champion in any weight class since Freitas. Was it Alejandro Freitas? He fought Barry Jones and he got stopped by Corrales. I think he was the last Brazilian champion. I'm pretty sure he was Brazilian anyway. But I don't think there's been a champion since then. And I think there should have been on Friday night. You know, obviously this fight had a lot of controversy going into it. And as if this fight didn't need any more controversy, actually, speaking of, because obviously Oscar Valdez tested positive for performance enhancers. And they were performance enhancers. They were helping him make weight, which will give you an advantage. You know, those performance enhancers, they did about as much good as the old Postman's knock does. Not much on fight night, because he lost this fight. You know, look at his face. I know his face can't always tell who won a fight, but he was getting peppered in there. He really was. And it was a very, like, even the officiate, Conceicao got a point deducted. I think it was the 10th round. And that was dubious. Yeah, he did tap him. He tapped him around the back of the head. It wasn't like he went in and deliberately just went whack back of the head. No. So, you know, there was that. You know, Valdez has been clinging on to that all. He's had so many tough fights. You got to imagine it's going to catch up with him sooner or later. You know, I'm not. This is not me saying I'm wishing for his downfall. But when you've had tough fight after the Miguel Berchelt fight was an eyebrow raiser because it wasn't tough. I expected him to lose that fight. It's going to catch up. I mean, that Scott Quigg fight would take a lot out of anyone. So Valdez, look, he moves on. We'll see who he fights next. But questions need to be asked of VADA, the WBC, of everything really. Officials, just as this was a fight that needed no more controversy than it already had. That's the best way I can describe it. I already had too much controversy going into it. Didn't need any more. We got more. Unbelievable. One fight we had on Friday, which was brilliant, was Sam Eggington. Now, what was it about French fighters this weekend? But Sam Eggington was defending his WBC silver title, and I watched it on Channel 5. I didn't cover it, but it was very, very entertaining. Sam Eggington is 27 years old. He's the same age as me. My days. Sam Eggington, you would think at this stage he'd be feeling the effects of all them wars. Because Sam Eggington, I get the impression, spars quite similar to how he fights. You have to imagine some of them wars would catch up with him. They just don't seem to. I mean, it was, 2 years ago he got barred from pillar to post by Liam Smith, stopped in 5 in a one-sided beating. He had that war with Ted Cheeseman last year at Fight Camp. Some people felt he was unlucky. I thought Cheeseman nicked it. He was fairly in control against Frankie Gavin, although to be fair, that was the most entertaining fight Frank Gavin's ever been in. He got stopped against Nick Wakino in a couple of rounds. What else did he have? He had some more wars other than that. Who else did he fight? I'm trying to think, because he's definitely had more. Oh, he had that fight against Malignaggi where he used his head as his defense. He won the European title and then lost it. That was more of a boxing match to Muhammad Mamidi. He's had some interesting scraps, has Sam Eggington, and he's only 27 years old. And he's been in some wars. His face when he leaves the boxing ring, it just, even in this fight, was just marked up beyond belief. I like seeing Sam Eggington fight, I'll admit. I do enjoy it, but you do have to ask the question, how much longer can this guy keep doing that? And for his own sake, you got to ask that question, well, because it's not good to be having war after war after war where you take shot after shot after shot. And he was taking a lot of shots in this fight, make no mistake about it. You do wonder if this guy, the opponent he fought, had any real decent punching power, what would happen? Sam Eggington is ranked with WBC. He's talking about having a world title fight. Jamal Charlo is world champion at 168 with WBC. That is a very scary thought of Charlo versus Eggington. That's a very, very scary thought. And the shot that Eggington was getting hit with quite a bit was hooks and uppercuts. Charlo's uppercut is lethal. I hope for his sake that fight doesn't happen, for Eggington's sake, because that could really end badly for him. I'm amazed he keeps coming back. It really is. Like, he's fighting at middleweight, which is not his real division. He's really realistically 154 pounds. He was struggling because he had an advantage at welterweight, that he was bigger than everyone. It was diminished at 154 pounds. It's very much he looked noticeably smaller in there on Friday night. So, great fight. But Eggington, I worry because he's got a family. He's still very young, same age as me. He's been in some wars. Man, he's been in some wars. So there was that. Obviously, the card in Austria, we obviously saw Filip Hrgović. Yeah, that was a funny little fight, but Hrgović, one thing definitely struck me at Hrgović that I forgot to talk about in my post fight was that he didn't appear to have trained much for this fight. He definitely looked fleshier than I'm used to seeing him, which is something I like to see guys in the ring in good shape, and Hrgović definitely, for my money, looked fleshy. It was a laugh. It was a fun fight. The guy he was fighting had a padded record, and it showed. There's not really much more else to say. I've done a post fight on it. It was a funny little fight. That's kind of the best way to describe it. Tony Yoka, obviously, in Paris, getting a good win over Peter Malice. European title is probably next for Tony Yoka, because I believe they actually won some kind of snippet European title, and it was a EBU, not one of these tricket European titles that don't mean anything. No, it was legit EBU kind of tricket title. So I'd imagine European title is next for Tony Yoka. Who he fights, probably Marco Huck. I think he's mandatory, or I think was mandatory for Joe Joyce. So, Huck, don't really want to see it. Huck's seen better days years ago, but if it gets him a European title, yes, if that's what he wants, that's the way they're going to go. It's just that Huck is really best days for a cruiserweight, and even against Glowacki 6 years ago actually, he was over the hill. He was seeing better days back then. So now, Jesus, against a heavyweight, a hard hitting heavyweight like Yoka, might not end the best. Let's talk about some boxing news. Alright, we don't talk about no boxing news. That's the fights from the weekend done. Eddie Hearn has stated that he wants to put in a bid for this purse bid, which is coming up this week, the 14th. I think that's Wednesday or Thursday, isn't it? Or is it actually? No, it's Tuesday. Is it Tuesday? I'm pretty sure it's Tuesday. For Crawford versus Porter. That purse bid obviously got put on the back foot. We'll need to see what happens with that fight. I hope that fight gets made. I like the fight. I think it's very good. I think it's a very competitive fight. So people are saying Porter's seen better days. I think he's seen better days, but he's still a world level welterweight, and he would still be the best name actually on Terence Crawford's resume. I think Terence Crawford will win the fight, but it'd be interesting to see how he gets on. Can he do a better job than Errol Spence? Because that was a very tough fight for Errol Spence. Very tough. Incredibly tough fight for Errol Spence. Sean Porter is not an easy night's work for anyone. That's why I laughed when Conor Benn called him out, because it was like, you want to get your head taken off. If you do, then fight Sean Porter, because Sean Porter is still world level welterweight, definitely 100%, and it's going to be I hope it happens. I don't want this to fall by the wayside. I really hope it doesn't. Why is Eddie Hearn putting in a bid? God knows. Potentially to spite Bob Arum, because Bob Arum has been making life very difficult for Eddie Hearn. So maybe he feels, you know what, I'm gonna buy this fight. I'm gonna bid for this fight, and if I get it, I'm putting it on the zone. Eddie Hearn, but that's a great fight nevertheless. So there was that. Deontay Wilder has been talking about Tyson Fury, saying that, he's heard rumours that some of his sparring partners, or some of the people he knows, have been in camp with Tyson Fury and were giving him the business, namely Jared Anderson. I said that was one of the reasons why I felt potentially maybe Tyson Fury was looking to get this fight moved forward. And, it doesn't surprise me, because Jared Anderson, in sparring is very different to how a fight will go. So if you had Fury Anderson in a pro fight, it'd be very different to how it would be in a spar, because you got to take these things into consideration. In a spar, you could do 10 rounds. You could do 5 rounds with F.A. Ajagba, and then you stay on, but Jared Anderson comes in from rounds, say 6 to 10. So you could give someone the bid, because you're going in there fresh. So, I don't, and Jared Anderson's a very, very talented fighter. Very talented fighter, very good fighter. So, something like that, I could see it happening. I think that Eddie Hearn kind of alluded to ticket sales, and I suspect that's more so the reason. The closer we get to this fight, the more I'm still leaning towards Fury, but I have a thumbnail actually ready, and I might actually do a video on it in the next day or two about how I feel that Wilder, he definitely has a better chance in this trilogy fight. And I think that going into this trilogy fight, come October, he's got an even better chance. I'll touch on that more in the video. I'll go into kind of more in depth. Some people have said more the technical aspect. The technical aspect might help him, but I think more so mental. I think that definitely he's got the mental aspect of this delay is going to benefit Deontay Wilder exponentially, I believe anyway. So there was that. Obviously we had the Eubank Saunders back and forths. You gotta laugh at that. You gotta love it. It is funny. Eubank Saunders. Eubank saying he's the A side. Saunders saying he's pretty much going to retire unless, and that was on TalkSport where he said it. Look, if they do that fight, I would watch it. If it was pay-per-view, would I pay? Depending on the platform, yeah, I would, because I think it's a good fight. It's a fun fight. Both guys have improved a lot since their last fight. We'll need to see. I think that both guys have regressed though. I think that we're not going to... If these have a rematch now in 2021, 2022, we're not talking about peak Eubank or peak Saunders. Someone might say, surely it is peak Saunders and peak Eubank. No, I think that 2017 was peak Saunders. I think that was back when he was active and he was probably physically and mentally at his best. And I think that with Eubank, he's regressed a bit. Maybe not regressed a bit. Maybe that's the wrong word. But I think he's stagnated. And that's the better word. Because he's kind of stagnated since the George Groves loss. He's not really got any better, but he's not noticeably got any worse either. So, and at the end of the day, Eubank isn't getting any younger. Some of that athleticism and speed is going to wane. And for someone who focuses or relies a lot on his athleticism, if that starts to dip, you'll see it in his performances. So I think it's an interesting little scrap. I'd like to see it. I hope they do it. I think it'd be good. I think it'd be good. Is that really it? Dylan White, I think, has been talking about Tyson Fury. He went in a bit on Tyson Fury, on social media over certain things. Dylan White, Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury did say if he beats once he beats, I should say, Deontay Wilder, that's his words, not mine. It's a 50-50 fight. Well, not 50-50, but I think it's an open discussion as to who wins that fight, Deontay Wilder, Fury. But he said after he beats Wilder, Dylan White in the UK. And when's the last time Fury fought in the UK? 2018? Sefa Safiri? Yeah, that was the last time he fought in the UK. He fought in Manchester. I don't even know. I was listening to Hatman's video on this, and he was saying, does Fury even have a license with the British Boxing Board of Control? That's a good question, because I don't know. How long does a license last? Because I don't really know the ins and outs of licenses. If it's elapsed, would he renew it? He said he wouldn't fight in the UK again. God knows. Fury says a lot of things. That's him contradicting himself. He said only last year that he'll never fight in the UK again, or was it this year that he said he'll never fight in the UK again? And then he's saying he'll fight Dylan White in the UK. There you go. Tyson Fury says a lot of things. He really does say an awful lot of things. other than that, that's really kind of the week in a nutshell, you gotta say, because I was very, by my standards, inactive last week because there wasn't a lot to talk about, and I don't want to just do videos for the sake of doing them. That's why, like, I recorded like 2 videos last week that I never uploaded because the quality just wasn't good. And I don't mean the quality in terms of camera, that was alright, but just the subject really didn't. I was kind of losing interest talking about it, and I didn't feel it was good enough to go on YouTube. And if I don't really feel it, then surely people wouldn't want to watch it either. You know, it was a real kind of boring week for boxing. There wasn't much going on. There wasn't much being talked about. And that's really kind of all from the digging that I could really find on to talk about from last week. Hopefully this week has a little bit more in it. Do we have anything to look forward to this week? Actually, I'm just trying to think. Because obviously Frank Warren's show got binned at the last minute. The Sonny Edwards card, which I was upset about. Because I like Sonny Edwards. He's very switched on man. He's a very switched on man. Very switched on. And I would have liked to have seen him because he's a very good boxer. Callum Johnson was set to fight on that card as well. So there's just not really... Is there anything else really on this week? Maybe my mind's going blank, but I'm not thinking of anything this week that's really on. So it could be a quiet week in terms of fights to review and preview. But saying that, I've got some fights to preview this week. I'm going to do one for Marku and his opponent. I'm going to do at some stage this week the prediction for AJ Usyk. I think it's time we get that in and out. So I'm looking forward to that fight. Man, I'm looking forward to that fight. I mightn't even see that fight live because I'm away that night in Belfast. I might not even see that fight live, but I will try to. I will definitely try to get, and I might not be staying in Belfast, might be coming home that night because I can't get a hotel up there for anything. But we'll wait and see. We'll watch the space for that. But that's pretty much the week in a nutshell. So I will leave you there. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope your Monday is getting off to a good start with this video, and I hope we all get some good news. You know, we've had some good news. Today's Sunday. Small little victory for all the people in the UK. Very small victory, but we'll take them nonetheless. I know what that means. In terms of everything else, I hope your day goes well. And yeah, I hope some more good news follows for anyone watching this. Be it whatever. I hope you all get something good. For now, lads and lassies, I hope you enjoy it. Smash the like button, subscribe, of course, if you haven't. Hit the notification bell. It takes 2 seconds. And for now, I'll talk to you. Peace.